Alrighty, Deadly Tarantula Girl coming to you from inside. We are doing a live hangout today with Joe, and I meant to ask you how to pronounce your last name for sure.
Phelan.
Phelan, okay. Joe Phelan from Port City Python. So how are you doing today, Joe? And happy Father's Day. I don't know if you're a dad or not.
I'm doing great. I am an unproven breeder, but I do have a lot of snake babies. That's about it.
Well, there we go. So you are a dad. So yeah, happy Father's Day to you and everybody else that's out there, of course. If you're not a dad, you've probably got one in your life. So happy Father's Day. So tell me a little bit about where you're at and what you've got going on.
Yeah, so me and my girlfriend Melissa, we operate Port City Pythons, and as a company, we work with mostly corn snakes and different North American colubrids. And we also have a podcast and YouTube channel. So, yeah, so we're kind of doing, I guess, something similar to you, just in a totally different space.
Yeah. So tell me what came first. Okay, I guess we ought to start back where I like to start off is tell us a little bit about how you got started in herps and your educational background.
Yeah, I got started in herps actually through my dad. So as a kid, my dad kept, I think he was keeping like boa constrictors in the 80s and stuff like that. And then eventually when I got old enough, we started attending the White Plains Reptile Expo. And that's kind of when I was exposed to all the different kinds of animals, all the crazy things that were going on there, especially at that time. And so that really led me into being interested in herps. And then high school came and then college. And in college, I had a redfoot tortoise, but eventually through 2 years into college, I ended up going into the military. And then I was in for 6 years, and then I just got out last year. So.
Oh, cool. So you're kind of sort of back into it somewhat recently.
Yeah, it's probably been 5 years as a whole since I've been breeding, but 3 years since I've been like taking it very seriously on all fronts, including the social media stuff.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about how you got started in YouTube and podcasting.
That was something that at first I just had these skills basically from high school, and then in college I was a graphic design major, and before eventually switching over to business. But so I had the skills basically to make videos. I enjoyed making videos and just figured that it would help, educate our buyers. And if customers have questions, hopefully I have videos about it. So it was just really to help educate, the public about corn snakes. And weirdly enough, corn snakes became less popular, than when I was a kid. Corn snakes were the number one snake you would get. And then now it's ball pythons are the number one snake you could get. And I think a corn snake's a lot easier to keep than a ball python, in my opinion. So I just wanted to let people know that,
Yes. So pardon my averted eyes. We've got some people here on the chat. First have to say hi to Diego Villa, who's one of my fourth graders. He's a fifth grader now since summer. He's on here. We've got a couple other people, the Tarantula Guy and Snake Man, and they're saying Happy Father's Day, and they're saying hello and hi, and they're talking to each other a little bit, and so that's awesome. So, it's interesting that you bring that up about colubrids, really, corn snakes, and all of colubrids, sort of, from my observation, is 20 years ago they were the it snake, and ball pythons were really kind of thought of as sort of a trash snake. They were, of course, there weren't all the morphs back then. There wasn't a lot of, that was kind of early in the days of captive breeding ball pythons. So, they were kind of thought of as like cheap, garbage, like parasitic, like trouble feeders. I don't know, just they didn't garner a whole lot of respect or a lot of attention. And colubrids were the big deal. Corn snakes was a huge, huge one. You had the loves and the barkers and, people doing some really cool stuff, which I still like corn snakes. Then they kind of went out of fashion, and now colubrids are really coming back again. So you were smart to get in front of that wave there.
Yeah, it's something that I guess it wasn't really contrived in that way. I mean, I saw that coming. So I knew that it was definitely an opportunity. Like, I wasn't blind to that. But I had tried ball pythons in the past. I had a decent collection of 50 or so ball pythons and bred them and did all that. But I just, for whatever reason, I always struggled to get into a lot of the more stuff. For the most part, I didn't have the money at the time at all.
Right.
To get into the cool project that would really, I'd be able to make a dent in anything. So I was like, well, I've always had these corn snakes, and why don't I put those to work and see what I could do with that? Since I enjoyed keeping them more than I did the ball pythons, and they were just a little bit easier with, I could always feed them frozen thawed. So therefore I could be like lazy and not breed my own, but even though now I'm breeding my own,
I hear that.
but yeah, the ball pythons, when with the live feedings, can be a little bit rough. And then I had nidovirus go through my collection. So, and that was before nidovirus was really identified.
Right.
And so basically just watched a bunch of ball pythons slowly die over a certain period of time. And then that really changed a lot of my focus as well, because I just figured, why not work with different things? And if I'm going to have things, that's when I started like my Louisiana pine snake project, and like rarer pythons and stuff I acquired just because I was like, damn, if I'm going to be doing this, I might as well do it with some things that not everyone's working with.
Right. No, I personally, first of all, I'm a little bit funny in that I like what I like regardless of what other people like. I don't tend to be attracted to the other things that other people are attracted to just because they're in fashion or just because they're popular. There are things that are really big that I'm just like, it really doesn't do much for me. And then there are other things that are very affordable, kind of run of the mill, that don't excite people that I really get excited about. It's just my personal preference. And so I'm kind of the same way in that sense. So tell us, first of all, thank goodness for now that we have a lot of the knowledge to learn about quarantining animals and sort of proper sterilization techniques and things like that, which I personally don't believe everything should be 100% sterile. But yes, that we know about some of those viruses and things now. Thank goodness we're more educated, because it protects us and it protects our animals, of course. So, my condolences that you had to go through that situation. That's a tough experience. But for those who do not know how fabulous corn snakes are, educate us a little bit about how great corn snakes are and why you love them.
So why I love them is that they're obviously a really personable snake. They come out very, very small. I mean, if they're in your hand, just curled up, they'll take up about like a $50 size in the palm of your hand. So,
Yes.
and when you're at a reptile show and for whatever reason, there's not too many baby corn snakes, people are just blown away at how small they are. But that is actually kind of there's a downside to that, in the fact that they escape. They can escape from almost anything. So that's kind of the problem that we encounter because of the size. I'd like the size personally, but for customers who are trying to put your baby corn snake in a 10-gallon tank, it might be an issue. It will find its way out somehow.
Right.
And then, so I like the size, but you got to be wary about that. And then also, there's just so many different colors and patterns, and there's just as many, combinations. Maybe not as many as ball pythons, but in that ballpark, and they all work recessively instead of, a lot of them are incomplete dominant in ball pythons, and there's some recessives, and then corn snakes, there's just pattern mutations, all that kind of stuff. And then you can breed them together. And then since they're all recessives, you'll pop out stuff that you didn't know you had. So since they've been bred so long.
Exactly. That's really exciting. I always feel like it's kind of like, I don't know. It's really exciting to breed corn snakes. Probably not if it's a wild caught snake, but in general, if you have a snake that was captive born and bred, you never know what you're going to get out of that combination. And that is so exciting. Do you have any idea how many morphs there are in the corn snake world?
Oh, I wish I knew had a number, but if anyone wants to check out iansvivarium.com, is basically like if you guys are ball python people, it's like World of Ball Pythons, but it's for corn snakes.
Oh, wow. What's it called? Eves?
Ian's vivarium. So
Okay.
Ian, like IAN
Okay.
vivarium, and that will list all of your phenotypes and locales. So like Miami corn snakes look
Oh, wow.
completely different than say Kentucky corn snakes or something like that. So there's different phenotypes and there's different genes, and that has pictures of all of them, like as hatchlings, as adults, because corn snakes will go through a giant color change from babies to adults. So it's nice to see them in all stages, and that's kind of like the beginning of your little corn snake morph guide Bible, if you will.
Exactly. So I've got to ask you, do you have any tricks for getting the little, gosh, they're so tiny, the little tiny babies to start feeding? What do you do? Because, I mean, I've got a clutch of milk snakes right now, pale milk snakes that I've been raising up for a year and a half, and they are still so freaking small. We're still pinky pumping some of them. And if you don't know what a pinky pump is, don't ask. It's disgusting. And it's one of the safest ways to force feed a smaller snake. But oh my gosh, what do you do to get those babies going?
Yeah, so I've tried a bunch of different things, and it's not really a one size fits all. It's you try one thing, then you move it to the next. So I always go in a hierarchy of what I want them to eat. So ideally, my babies will all be on frozen thawed, small pinkies, as small as possible, because corn snakes are tiny. So
Right.
I'll start there. If something does not take that frozen thawed pinky, then in 4 days or so, I'll offer a live pinky. If they don't take the live pinky, then I will start with a frozen thawed, and I will usually scent it with. I make this anole juice. So I basically get an anole from a pet store.
You said that as you were reaching for your bottle. I'm like, he's going to show us. He's going to take a drink of it.
That's what I've been drinking this whole time.
Your anole juice.
So you take this anole from the pet store, and then you basically gut it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's 100% necessary, but that's what I do. And I mean, not that I did it for fun. I just figured you don't want like
Style. Okay.
all the nasty like intestines in there and stuff like that. But
All right.
so I gut it. I usually put about 2 ounces of water into a pot for 1 anole. So, and then I will bring that water to a boil, and then I will put it to low, and then I'll let it simmer for like 4 to 6 hours while I stir it.
So like a witch, kind of. You get like the newt intestines and the eyeballs and brew it slowly. Do you ever wear a hat while you do it?
I cackle a lot, yeah.
You keep the broom nearby.
And then I fly up to the snake room and drop little pinkies off to everyone.
Okay, so you make your crazy little anole stew, and then you like simmer the mouse in it. Is that how it goes?
Oh yeah, I'll just let it cool, and then the corns are less specific about if they need heat on their food source. So, I mean, it could be room temperature, and they'll usually eat it. So that's not like a giant concern. But yeah, I'll just take a frozen thaw that I thawed out in warm water, and I will. If it's a really picky feeder, I will actually wash it with either baking soda and water and run it under the sink, or I will do Dawn dish soap and then wash it completely off. And then that will get the scent of the pinky. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it works.
Interesting.
And
So
I think that's
wash the mouse with dish
with
soap?
either Dawn dish soap or baking soda. So like Dawn dish soap is obviously very, very low impact as far as, they use it on wildlife and all that stuff.
Yeah, rinse it well, and yeah.
And yeah, you just got to make sure that you obviously wash it off completely. And then dip it into the anole juice. And then you have essentially, hopefully, a pinky mouse that smells like an anole, because most of the corn snakes in the wild, as well as a lot of smaller colubrids, they're either starting off, if you're in West Texas, you're talking about gray banded king snakes or something, they start off on geckos. And then, say, a corn snake in South Florida will start off on anoles. So, and sometimes you'll see some of your Miami locales, since Florida has so many anoles there, they're actually harder seemingly to get onto pinkies than, say, some of your more northern animals. So.
Interesting. I love that you have a name for your witch's brew. Anole juice. Send me some of that on Halloween, would you?
I
Um,
got
awesome. We've got a couple more people who've jumped on the chat here. It's kind of going off the rails here. Let's see. Isaiah Newman joined us.
Oh, I know Isaiah.
Do you? Sassad saying he loves corn snakes. Let's see. They have ball pythons. They have corn snakes. Tarantula guy is saying cool. Isaiah is saying he's had those for sale on his website. I have a few. He's saying he loves gray bands. We've got John Feely from Feely's Clutch here. Let's see. They're talking to each other. John Feely. I don't know how to say your name. Okay. Put in the message thing if I'm saying your name correctly. Euclides? I don't know. Zoto? My apologies if that's wrong. He's talking about he had some crabs and stuff. Yeah, people are loving your shirt. Man, it's just going on and on. So
Available on portcitypythons.com. There's a plug.
cool.
We actually make these shirts.
Those are so cute. All right, so anybody who likes his shirt, which that's a little Rugrat throwback, if you didn't catch that, yeah, that's really cute. I assume that's, yeah, it is. It definitely is. Okay, so someone was so kind to come and bring me some of our colubrids here. So these are amazing little jewels that you're telling us about how to get your baby started. So this is one of my little stinkers here. I had this clutch of pale milk snakes that were actually reproduced by Dr. Mark Heinrich out of Carlsbad, New Mexico. And I love these animals, but for gosh sakes, have they been a royal pain. And yeah, for anybody who's following me on social media, I can't not talk about this right now. One of my miniature horses gave birth last night, and I have a 15-inch tall little horse in my yard right now.
Wow.
Living and breathing and being fluffy.
That's amazing.
I know. He's beautiful. Maybe I'll carry him, have him bring someone, carry him in here. I'm so excited. I can't even. He's so cute. A little colt. So
you're saying that you'd rather focus on playing with the miniature pony than be messing with the null juice?
A null juice. Maybe if the mother's not lactating, I could give the colt some null juice. Maybe. I don't know. Never know. Oh, let's see. What else did he bring me? Oh, this is one of my amelanistic motley corns. Gosh, corn snakes are so tiny. Have you ever had twins? One that was tiny, tiny, tiny?
I wish I could say I have. I actually haven't had twins.
Oh, there's a pretty little one. Oh, are you flicking your tail at me? I love that they do that. So, sorry, keep telling us about how awesome corn snakes are, and I'm just going to sit here and play with corn snakes. This one has a big mouse in it, so.
Yeah, and as you can see, that's not it's not a huge snake, but I'm guessing that's probably 8 months to a year old or so.
Yes, at least.
So if you think about how small the snake starts off.
Right, crazy, so crazy.
And then obviously we start off on tiny, small pinkies that are laid directly out of the mother.
Right.
And
then laid out of the mother, not born.
My bad. Yeah. I don't know.
Freshly hatched.
And then we move up to 2 pinkies, probably in 4 or 5 months or so, and then. But once you start getting to fuzzies or hoppers, that's when they really, really take off. So at that 8 to 12 months range, you can probably get that guy on a fuzzy now, probably finally. And just the nutrition behind a fuzzy is they're going to get a lot more protein in comparison to the pinkies are just little fat bubbles.
Yeah, they're not even, skeletally, they're not even very well formed yet. And so, yeah, a fuzzy does have a lot more nutrition, even though it's not that much bigger than a little pinky, especially a little just born pinky.
Yeah, so you'll see them blow up. But
I brought my horse. Sorry.
So we do have a horse.
Yes. Okay, hold on. This is urgent business here. Oh, okay. Come here, little boy.
Can you lift him up? Is he that small?
This is a miniature horse right here.
Oh my God! It looks like a donkey.
He does kind of look like a little donkey. His teeny weeny tail, it's just that long. And his little fuzzy mane, he barely even has any hair yet. Isn't he cute?
That's crazy. How many horses do you have?
I only have 4 now, miniature horses. I have 1 stallion and 2 little mares. Okay, you ready to get him? On to him tight. Don't be afraid. All right. And now 1 little colt. And so my mare that had him, she is a veteran mom. She's already had several foals from my little stallion that I have now. And so she gave birth like a pro. It was awesome. She did absolutely everything she was supposed to do. She's awesome. So anyway, sorry. Back to snakes. You were talking about getting them starting off with newborn pinks, putting that anole sauce on them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say probably the biggest thing goes with most animals, and I get these questions a lot. My baby corn snake isn't eating, and source is a big issue. Obviously, if wholesale corn snakes, most of them right out of the egg, 95% of them are going to eat or so, or maybe even 99% of them. But you can get those people who don't get them started before they just wholesale them out to a pet store or someone who, say, some people call it flip. I don't know. That seems like a very derogatory term, but I don't really look down upon it that much. But but you'll just get people who don't start feeding their animals, and it's a really big issue for someone who's unexperienced, has their first snake, and it's not eating.
Well, so, it's definitely a more reputable breeder will establish a baby, whatever species it is, before they sell it. But, scientifically, statistically, a small percentage is just going to fail to thrive for whatever reason. That's science. And so there are a few animals that if they're sold before they're established, they will fail to thrive almost no matter what you do. So I'm glad that you're bringing that up because especially, if it's somebody who's not as experienced, that's it's an unfortunate truth, but something that they just kind of probably need to know. So, yeah.
Yeah. And there's just a certain point to where I can only do so much with, say 150 babies or so.
Right.
I can only do so much. So if that baby doesn't take, the last resort is just putting in straight up a null. And I used to start, assist feeding pinky feet and mouse tails and stuff like that. But in my experience, most of the time that snake, if it has to go to that point, is not going to thrive at all. So it's different for your milk snakes because they are animals that probably thrive off of non-mammal prey wherever they're from.
Right.
So there's a fine difference. So don't say like, oh, my gray band isn't eating, so it's a failure to thrive. No, because those all eat geckos from the rip. So a corn snake, though, that never switches over, or never eats at all, not even its prey that is native to its habitat, so not even a null, then it's like it's not eating anything. And then you have like babies that just randomly die because there's stuff internally that you never see.
Yeah, they're just chronic problems. I mean, that's the same reason that sometimes you have slugs or sometimes you have stillborn babies. That's just, for that animal to go from a single cell and an embryo to a fully developed animal, it's a complex process, and sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work out. And so, yeah, that's just the truth.
And sometimes we're our own worst enemy with the incubation process. Luckily, with colubrids, you essentially neglect them as much as possible. You just put them in a cabinet, on top and let them get 80 degrees or so, and then just leave them.
Okay, so quick question, and then I wanted to your incubation topic kind of go on with that. What age or how many meals do you think is reasonable to consider a baby corn snake corn snake an established feeder?
Typically, really, it only takes a few times, but it will. So often you get that one, it will take its first meal, and then you're like, oh, this is the best corn ever. And then he'll, no matter what, he'll miss the next one. And then what I want to see is, consecutive meals.
Okay.
So if they're spotty every other week, whatever, I could see that obviously I need to develop them more and get them feeding better. If it's 5 consecutive days, so every time I offer it eats for 5 times, then I consider that an animal that I can put up for sale.
Okay. So speaking of incubation, yes, as you've mentioned, corn snakes are probably the easiest to incubate. However, what temperature fluctuations would you say are relatively safe? And what would you say is an ideal temperature to keep during incubation? And also, I'd like to know about your incubation chambers and your methods.
Yeah, so kind of like you hinted at, they can actually fluctuate, but there's a low that you don't want to get below, and then there's a high that you don't want to get above. So it seems like at temperatures into the 90s, you start to see issues. Probably like 92 is the hottest I would ever want to see my eggs, but I really don't want them into the 90s at all. And then 76 would typically, or I've seen ones go at 72 degrees. They take 96 days. You'll get a clutch that's mostly healthy, but you'll get a few kinks and some weird stuff. So typically what my room runs is 82. And then at night, sometimes it will get down to 79 degrees. So It's really not, it will fluctuate. It's not a giant fluctuation, but they tend to do great at those temperatures. And then my medium, I've changed. Last year I did cocoa chip. That worked great. This year I'm doing sphagnum moss. That works great.
Just sphagnum moss? Just no perlite? No, tell me about it. I want to know everything.
Yeah, so it's just sphagnum moss. So I will, yep. And then, so I'm making it damp, not wet, squeezing it out, making sure nothing's dripping out. I would rather be on the dry side than the humid side. So I will look at my eggs every few days, and if I see dimpling, then all I do is add water. The issue is when you go too wet, it's harder to dry them out than it is to just add a little bit of water. So once you get into the damp eggs, then you start to see windows in them, and then you can start to see molding and stuff like that. And that's a little bit harder to control than, say, going on the arid side to begin with. And what I put that sphagnum moss, and you can use cocoa chip as well. What I put it in is basically to-go containers, like food containers.
Okay.
And I just poke like the tiniest little air hole, just one air hole. And
on top?
Yep, on top.
Okay. And
that's it.
You don't ventilate them, you don't open them, you don't mess with them at all.
If I have to open them, it's just because to add water, or to, if I see an egg going bad, I want to try to isolate it from the clutch if I can. But
right. This is interesting. Somebody told me that if they have an egg going moldy, they sprinkle tinactin on it, which is like an antifungal. It's for like athletes.
Foot powder. Yeah.
You ever heard of that? Have you ever tried
that? That's an old one. That's like old ball python dudes used to do that, and I'm not sure exactly who came up with that, but apparently it works. I've also heard like the crazy glue will actually rob the moisture of the egg and will create like a hard shell around it. So some people use crazy glue or liquid Band-Aid. I've seen that happen.
Just cover the mold. That way it doesn't continue growing.
I think whatever how like crazy glue dries super like dry and hard. I think for whatever reason it sucks up the moisture somehow. I don't know. I don't do it because honestly I don't have that many issues. And if an egg's gonna go bad, typically it's gonna go bad, at least from what I've seen in colubrids. But yeah, people do that.
Okay, we've got some people jumping on talking about the horse and stuff, but feeding mouse tails and keeping your fingers crossed. But so somebody's asking what a typical clutch is for. I'm guessing they're asking for corn snakes.
Yeah, so it's pretty typical to get like 12 to 25 eggs. I start my females off really slow and just I use 3 to 4 years as a marker to when I start them getting going. So that first year they may lay 6 eggs. That next year they may lay 10 to 12 eggs, and then they progressively get higher and higher, and they can produce pretty easily into their teens.
So what's your oldest breeder right now? Well, I guess you've only have well, I mean, but you had some, did you buy some adults when you got back into this collection?
Yeah, well, I had actually one corn snake that I had the whole time. And
Oh,
so I had him since middle school, and he is now,
4 years ago?
yeah, he's like 15 or so now.
Wow.
So so yeah, and he'll breed whenever. He had a clutch last year, and the female that he was with, she was one of my older girls as well, and she was probably 8 to 10 years old or so. I got her as an adult, but I've had her like 6 years since, and she actually had an oviduct come out with her clutch last time, which happens in corn snakes every once in a while. But so she had to get her oviduct removed, and so she's unfortunately retired now.
Oh, wow. So I'm assuming you have a pretty reasonable reptile vet in your area?
Yeah, at the time we were still living in Texas, and it was one of those things where the good vet didn't have any openings, and I had to go to this kind of sketchy thing because it was an emergency situation, and yeah, I mean it all worked out. She ended up like prolapsing again, but it's kind of weird that the piece in like one day what prolapse dried off and broke off, and like I just cleaned it out of the enclosure, and then I was like, okay, I think she's gonna die or something very very soon, and that was like 2 years ago. So she's still doing whatever. So
Wow, that's interesting.
these snakes are very very hardy.
Yeah, they are. That's a good thing once you get them going. Corn snakes, yeah, they're pretty resilient. We've got some more people that have jumped on. Gotta love carpet pythons is saying hi to both of us, and some people are just kind of chatting. Um, that was another question I wanted to ask you. What made you relocate from Texas to, I believe you're in Philadelphia now?
Yeah, so I've moved all over the place. So when I was in the army, I was in upstate New York, and then I was in Colorado, and then I was in Texas, and then I got out last year, and that was an opportunity. And then Melissa was in grad school, and she graduated, and so we kind of had a new start. We could go anywhere because we were both free now, in a sense, and our families, her family's in North Carolina, mine's in New York, so we went somewhere in the middle, and we moved with a lot of snakes. It's just always interesting.
So, tell me about your lovely lady. I know, does she always co-host the podcast with you? I absolutely love hearing her chime in. First of all, it's just more fun with two people there, but she's just adorable and beautiful. I got to see a video today that she was actually in where you guys did a Q&A, and that was really cute. I don't know if that was a newer or an older video, but I was just kind of doing some last minute research on you guys. And what's your history, and how does she feel about the animals?
Oh, and we first got together. And by the way, when I had so many animals before I met her, so it's kind of when you get to that point, I don't know if anyone can relate, but it's kind of you. I just told her up front and said,
Yeah.
if you don't like them, this isn't gonna work, right?
Right.
So and that's kind of like a weird place to be in, I suppose. But that's kind of how it goes if you want to build your whole life around this and be successful at it. So I had to tell her. She wasn't into it, and then I kind of explained some of the economics behind it, but those were completely fudged because I was just convincing her at that point. I mean,
Like, this one little egg here is the golden goose that can bring us $100,000 in 12 months.
those were the days when that was the truth. But yeah, with the corns, that's not happening. But she saw that I was into it and all that stuff. Eventually, she got to the point where she could go in the room. That was the first step, even getting her to go in the room. And then eventually I got her to hold one. And then, probably 8 months later, I have to go to training for 2 weeks, and she had to set up baby corn snakes. And she filmed it, and she did good, meaning by all the babies got where they were supposed to, but her means weren't exactly traditional. They were all bitey when they came out, so she was freaking out. She had a really tough time with it. So that's part of why I got out, because I can't leave her with all the snakes and everything. Like, it's a lot of work. And then, so her first clutch that she's ever seen, she had to set up, and that was, yeah, that was a little overwhelming for
Talk
sure.
about jumping in feet first. There is someone, Isaiah Newman, I think you said you know who that is. He is asking, out of an egg, how long do they have to get on food before they don't tend to make it? So that's a good question, because, an animal is born, if they go through the full term with some yolk in them, they're kind of in a non-feeding stage when they first hatch. Not born, I'm thinking horses. And so, yeah, that's a really great question. Go ahead and tell us what you can about that.
Yeah, so if something hasn't even showed any interest in food, and it's more of, I've seen some big hatchlings come out and they can last and look great for 2 months, and then all of a sudden they'll turn on. I've also tried to brumate, young hatchlings coming out right out of the egg and then bringing them back up, and then some of them feed after that.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, within 2 months they got to get going. But I also am looking at their body shape and stuff like that. So some of them will kind of, I want to say, like, erode differently as far as their condition goes. And I just want to be diligent on how they're looking rather than always worrying about the numbers, because it can be very, very variable.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to have some babies that are kind of thick and fat and hearty compared to others that just sort of look a little bit scrawny right off the get-go, and they're not going to have the same reserve. So when you say brumate, how cool are we talking, and what do you do exactly for these little ones?
Yeah, so if I have the advantage of having the adults down at a certain time, which is typically about 55 degrees, and if I have babies into fall, then say November, then they'll go down in the 55-degree brumation with the adults.
Whoa, before they fed?
Yeah. So they will actually, in the wild sometimes, if it's a late clutch, like, I think this happens a lot in Texas when I was herping, like, I would see these Texas rat snakes that look like hatchlings.
Oh, well, like in the spring, because they had
It would be February, yeah, because they're hatching and they can't really find food beforehand, and then it gets cold, and then they will brumate. But luckily, since brumation, cuts down almost all the metabolism, they're able to survive through the winter.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it kind of puts their system into a stasis, so they're not really burning through that fuel, and those yolk stores can last a while. That's really interesting. I don't think anyone's ever told me that they brumate their brand new babies before. Brings me to my next question. Do you breed seasonally? Do you do it year round? I know in Philadelphia there are seasons, of course, unlike some areas of Texas that are somewhat dry and desert-like year round. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so colubrids, you're going to have a distinct, brumation period. It doesn't have to be down to 55 degrees. I've done it actually at about 70 degrees, and most people would consider that dangerous because that's kind of a midway zone as far as they're not all the way slowed down and stuff like that. So I could tell you that it will work, but I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. And then, so obviously during brumation, you're not feeding at all or doing any of that. You let them clear out for 2 to 3 weeks. And basically, sorry, I forgot your initial question.
So I was asking about your brumation process and whether or not you breed seasonally.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, seasonality is 100% like necessary, at least to varying degrees. So
okay.
I breed seasonally. Brumation's like a good reset button in a way. So if you have something that is acting or is not feeding, for instance, sometimes that acts as a good reset, and it will come up kind of like a different snake.
Right.
And we'll see some I know some females that go crazy, when they get out of brumation, and then they'll eventually settle down, come summer and fall. And so it's super important to put them into brumation, then get them up sorry, I should explain better. I brumate pretty much Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And then I'll put them straight down to 55 degrees. And then it will fluctuate a little bit because it's a basement. I'm trying to keep it 55, but it will be anywhere from 65 to 50. And even in Texas one time, my heater broke and they got down to below freezing. And yeah, and there were corns in their water dishes and stuff like that. So
did you lose anybody?
No, they came out perfectly fine.
That's awesome.
I think that's just something that you don't want that to be prolonged.
Of
but
course.
if it's for a short period of time, you're going to be okay. And that was a weird thing where our breaker tripped, and it was just a whole mess. But
wow.
You take them up typically second week of February, sometimes first week of February, and then try to feed them within 3 or 4 days of being up. Okay. And then I'll start the females on typically a little bit under, maybe a hopper mouse. And then the males, I may start a hopper mouse as well. And then the males, I won't feed for another week or two. But the females, I'll hit them every 4 to 5 days with small mice. After they get that one hopper, we'll go to small mice. And then we'll eventually get to adult mice. And then by the time they're up to adult mice, they're pairing and then doing all that good stuff. And they'll feed all the way up to laying eggs, essentially.
Cool. So I know that this is all in your home. So I was going to ask where and how you brumate, but you said that you use the basement for brumation. So do you just put like a space heater in there to turn on when it gets like below 50, or how exactly do you do it? Because everybody's facility is a little bit different. I'm always curious when it's in someone's house.
Yeah, honestly, we don't have to control it at all. It will stay between 65 and 55 just because it's underground in the basement. And so I guess that's kind of, and sometimes I'll crack a window or close a window depending, but it's not something that has to be exact. And for whatever reason, we're lucky and it will stay.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So we've got some questions here in the comment feed. Oh, bye, Diego. I guess he has to go. So some people are saying they're enjoying the show and everything. Someone said, Snake Man says, corn snakes versus ball pythons, what would be better to care for? So since you've done both, if you want to give us a quick pros and cons on both. And also asking if corn snakes are picky eaters. So Snake Man, we kind of talked a little bit about how corn snakes are typically easier feeders, and Joe gave us a really good breakdown earlier in the show of exactly what he does for trouble feeders. So at the end, if you want to go back to the beginning on that one, he gives us like a super detailed, he tells us about his witch's brew that he makes. Classic. I can't wait to drink some. So Joe, tell us a quick pros and cons of ball pythons versus corn snakes, purely your opinion.
I will try not to be biased, but I will be biased, I'm sure.
I'm asking for your opinion. Be biased as you can.
So, pro for ball python is certainly that they come out larger. They're definitely kind of same issue as far as they can be a little bit defensive as babies. But I would say ball pythons are a little bit more apt to be hiders when they're scared. And then you have a few biters, but corn snakes are either runners or biters. So therefore, if they're a runner, then you may have issues with kids handling them and everything like that. So that's definitely a con with the corn snake being small and fast. And some will come out completely tame, some will come out bitey, some will come out flighty. That's just how it goes. And then for keeping wise, though, the whole tub thing with ball pythons, I do believe that they probably start off a lot better in a tub than say anything else. I mean, keeping them in a rack is just able to keep, for whatever reason, the humidity and the stable temperatures that they need. So it's hard to have someone take home a ball python and put it in a 10-gallon fish tank. It just doesn't work great. And and everyone's trying to do that, but obviously fish tanks are for fish. And then corn snakes, you can do that, which is a pro. but you better secure the enclosure very, very well.
Yes.
And then ball pythons, the seasonal feeding is kind of a pain. Your snake won't eat in the winter for 5 months and you'll freak out. You know, every first time pet owner, as far as ball pythons go, freak out the first time they go on a hunger strike. And corns luckily don't do that. And you don't have to brumate them if you're not breeding. So therefore you could just keep them up all year round, feed them regularly. I think one of the pros of the ball python is that they're not prone to obesity at all. When corns can pretty easily get obese if you're a lot of people like to maintain feeding once a week for their whole life.
Yeah.
But once they hit 2 or 3 years old, you really want to slow down your feedings to like, at a year old, I'm usually doing every 10 days. And then, yeah, so you really want to slow it down as they get a little bit older and they're getting bigger food items. And you'll see corn snakes with lots of scale spread and like hips, you know, near their cloaca, which is really unusual. Ball pythons just seem to expand to whatever the hell you feed them. So they tend to do great, like weight wise, for whatever reason. And yeah, I don't know what other things. Humidity is obviously a much bigger issue for ball pythons than corn snakes, and just the overall easiness the ease of care of a corn snake, just because it's a native to the United States. So, and not to mention their northern range is New Jersey, their southern range is the Florida Keys, so they inhabit all types of climates.
They do have a huge range.
Yeah, so therefore they are very, very adaptable, and that transfers over in captivity and makes them a bit hardier. I mean, I don't really get any type of respiratory stuff with them at all. And ball pythons seem to be a little bit prone to that. And yeah, and I guess a downside of ball pythons, if you're looking to breed and doing that, is the market's a little bit more competitive, I think.
Right.
And it's just a little bit more to handle. Corn snakes are a little bit more straightforward, in my opinion, when it comes to the sale and everything like that.
Okay, cool. So someone's asking if you have ball pythons in Philadelphia in the winter, how you heat them. And so I'm assuming that you have them in racks and you just have heat tape in your racks. But go ahead and tell us a little bit about that, because Philadelphia does not have the warmest winters.
Yeah, I think that's something to consider. It's also, you can't do the same thing that someone in Texas does up here, because in the winter you're heating your house, and for the most part, most of us are going to be rubbing the humidity from our house.
Right.
So you're having these really, really humid summers, and then you're having these arid winters because you're running the heat. So that is something to where, even with the corn snakes, I'm running a humidifier in my room.
Okay.
In my opinion, it's going to be an uphill battle unless you have a designated snake room. I mean, I'm sure you know that as much as everyone else does, is the fact that like those low ambient temperatures can be tough for the ball pythons, and it's nice to have a base temperature. I always kept my room at 80 to 82 for my corn snakes. They just run ambient like that.
Yeah.
And it seems that the ball pythons do decent at that higher ambient with supplemental heat tape as well.
So, there's the whole spider gene debacle going on right now in the ball python world. There are some lethal genes and some genes in ball pythons that are very closely tied with some neurological issues. Some people feel more passionately about it than others. But I'm not as familiar with corn snake genetics, and I feel like people know about that quite a bit. Are there any genes like that are very specifically tied to bug eyes or underbites or kinking or anything like that in the corn snake world, or genes that are lethal together?
Yeah, so that is something that it seems like if there's a lot of morphs of something, there's always going to be morphs that have negative impact on the animal. Okay. And so, yeah, that definitely happens in corns. We had at one point, we had Stargazer, and they actually found out that Stargazer was its own recessive gene.
Okay.
Therefore, if you had an animal that was a stargazer, you bred it to a normal, 50% of them are going to be, or 100% of them are going to be het for stargazer. So they're not going to have any symptoms, but you breed them together and you're going to get a stargazer. So what we had to do was figure out hets from non-hets, and I didn't do this. Luckily, this happened in like Kathy Love's day. It came in, I believe, in some of her the original Sunkiss line, and so she had to separate this stargazer from the Sunkissed and figure out what's going on there. So luckily, she was able through like diligence and hard work to breed it out. So it's different than say spider or jag in carpet pythons that you're never going to get out, no matter what you do, it's going to be to varying degrees. But we
Right.
also now have palmettos, which is a project that I work with, which if I knew everything about it, I still want the snake, but there is a higher chance that you're going to get bug eyes on that animal.
Okay.
So it is a form of incomplete leucism. So if you look at the palmetto, it's a white snake with splashes of color. And if anyone knows about leucistic Texas rat snakes, those also have bug eyes. So for whatever reason, these whatever is directing the gene for leucism to say get rid of melanin is also messing with eye development in some form or fashion. And we had a geneticist, Dr. Travis Wyman, on our podcast talk about this. So he can talk about this a lot better than I ever could.
Okay.
But it's something that seems like we're never going to 100% breed out. It's just connected to the gene. So that's when you get into a moral dilemma. Should you put in these animals who are lackluster? But the animals seem to thrive and have full lives.
Okay.
So it doesn't really affect anything as far as their life expectancy goes. At least we know so far. So I'm not sure how worried you have to be about that, but I don't want to sell bug-eyed animals to breed for breeding purposes. So that will be an interesting quandary that we have head-to-head palmetto eggs that are due to hatch this season. So we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there as far as what I want to do with those bug-eyed animals. And then we also have lavender, which will kink animals. And since I knew about the lavender before getting into it, I just decided not to work with it. So I just believe it's easier for me to just avoid that stuff than deal with lackluster animals that I'm feeding to the kink snake.
So yes, number one, I want to hear more about the lavender gene because I don't know much about it. Also, I wanted to know your personal thoughts on euthanization on babies who are not up to par or failing to thrive.
Yeah, so that is something that happens a lot in corn snakes because you have little animals that are pretty, at least for the first month or so, they can be pretty delicate. So if something comes out kinked or it's something that I can see is visibly not allowing the animal to move as it usually would, to tongue flick as it usually would, if you have any jaw issues that will probably lead to, say, like mouth rot or something in the future, I will just feed it to our king snake. I think that it is just as big of a part of what we do here as far as if I can feed a mouse to an animal and not feel bad about it, I shouldn't feel bad about feeding like a kinked animal that would have had a bad life. I mean, I would rather that go to food for another animal than to just be in the freezer or sold as a pet only, and it's going to basically silently suffer for the rest of its life. So that's kind of my views on it. I know some people may think that that's harsh to, to feed it to another snake, but that is how it goes. King snakes are natural born snake eaters. And in my opinion, that's giving my snakes what they need and what they want.
Right. Well, I mean, I was contacted by a local rabbit breeder who I have retics. I have big retics. And if she ever has rabbits that, not that have contagious illness, but maybe they're having bone problems. Rabbits often have problems with their teeth where you can correct their teeth, but they'll continue to grow, or just terrible ear infections that keep recurring, and you've got an animal with its head totally twisted around. When she has rabbits that are ready to be euthanized, old age, whatever, she calls me up and my retics euthanize them. And I'm not going to say I don't enjoy it by any means. But on the other hand, like she has said, do I want to envision some giant snake constricting my, beautiful rabbits and killing them? She said no. However, I feel like it's more natural and it's more justified than having 100 rabbit skeletons in my yard, 10 years from now. And, as an animal breeder, unfortunately, death does occur. And I'm that does not in any way indicate poor animal husbandry, or even in hospitals, people die. Even human babies die sometimes. Sometimes there's no way around it. And although some of those animals under very expensive veterinary care may actually live for a while, they may or may not have any quality of life. And so I really feel like that's definitely a huge matter of opinion. I know other people who think snakes should never be euthanized, that they should be allowed to live as long as they can.
But in the wild, that will sort itself out.
Exactly. Ultimately, it will either die of natural causes and the carrion will feed another animal, or it will be killed by another animal. And that's another reason why there are fewer genetic problems in the wild, because of natural selection. So, some might say by keeping them alive when they would have failed to thrive is maybe an unethical thing to do. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. And I think it varies a lot from person to person.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as a breeder, if you don't want to deal with death, this probably isn't the thing to do. And even don't even not even babies. You're talking about your females. You're talking about your male's hemipene one time gets ripped off. Like something crazy. There's potential for health issues on every single angle, and the easiest way to have something go wrong with your animal is to start breeding it, I think, sometimes, because it just opens you up to much more chances of something bad happening, unfortunately.
Yes. So speaking of horrible things,
those are always fun.
Yeah. What's the likelihood of corn snakes getting egg bound in your experience? And what are your thoughts on home remedies versus vet, versus how long you should wait, danger signs that an animal's in trouble? Give us the rundown on that.
Yeah, so people say that it's very, very common to have egg-bound females in colubrids, which I believe is true for most people, but I haven't seen it to a certain degree. Like I said, I've had that egg-bound female that brought out her oviducts with it. Maybe that's something that I will see as my colony ages. So most of my snakes are still under 6 years old, like the main breeding colony. So I don't want to say that they don't, and then say they hit 8 years old and that's when they start, those problems arise. So it's something that other people experience, but I haven't. The main thing is when they have their pre-lay shed, you are counting, anything past 2 weeks after that, that's when you start looking every day and seeing what's happening. And typically you'll see they have their pre-lay shed, then the animal is completely restless. They're going everywhere in the tub. You're like, what is going on? My snake is freaking out. Females aren't supposed to cruise around during the breeding season, but she'll calm down to go in her nest box. And then you're like, okay, I got 2 to 3 days and she's probably going to lay, maybe within a day. And if she's doing that and, it hits day 14, just when you got to look for it. And I don't think that there are unless you see that an egg is right there at the cloaca and about to come out, I mean, maybe that's when you try to do the syringe thing. I've never done that. I would rather go to a vet, to be honest. I've always done, um, I if I could palpate it out or do something, I mean, I'm sure I would try, but I don't know how confident I would be in that.
Well, and there's a huge, huge risk, just so everyone knows, if ever an egg ruptures in a female, she's at a huge risk for infection. So if you are going, please don't attempt to palpate unless you're very experienced and you're confident about what you're feeling and what, obviously you can hurt the female too if you're not careful. So have that on your mind. But I've had a scenario where she laid one slug and I could see that she was full of eggs. And I waited and waited, and then she just had them all just fine. So I was.
Sometimes, yeah, they'll spew a couple out, and
Yeah.
then they can come back for the others later, sometimes within a day or two. I mean, yeah.
Interesting. So, wow.
That usually happens with slugs. That doesn't very often happen with fertile clutches.
Yeah. What is the worst experience that you've had with snakes personally?
It was definitely the ball python thing, the nanovirus through the whole
Oh, yeah.
collection. So that was something that at the time, you know, I was still relatively new to breeding snakes, and I was doing all the quarantining, I was doing everything, but I had gotten in so many, you know, young animals to start my breeding colony that even if you're quarantining, you could have a quarantine of 30 animals. So all
Right.
those animals are, and then how do you split up 30 animals? And it's a whole
Right.
logistical nightmare. And then at the same time, I am treating certain animals, and we're trying, you know, Baytril, and we're trying, you know, stuff that kills certain fungal infections and stuff like that, and just crazy stuff, and nothing's happening. I'm getting, I send necropsies, and they're like, well, it kind of looks like IBD or something like that, but it's not. And we were just throwing money down a pit essentially, and everything was dying. I mean, I even tried the Barkers back in the day used to use this pig this pig vaccine or something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's something that I just got like at a feed store.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I dosed it wrong, but that definitely didn't work.
Ooh.
So I basically exercised every single thing that we knew we could do, and it was just slowly picking off the collection. And yeah, so that was the worst thing, just watching and feeling helpless. And then eventually, now that I know, you know, the viruses that are out there, I think that's probably like one of the biggest threats to our industry, is at least on the breeding side, is the fact that we're housing animals in a way that we're trying to put as many animals in small spaces, but that's going to make disease really, really easily to transmit between.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that will, if we don't get a hold of it early, you know, that will definitely be an issue in the future.
Right. Yeah. So how many animals was that at that point that was in your collection? You said about 50?
No, probably the whole collection, but the baby hatchling side of it was probably about 25. And so after that, I kind of just laid low for a little while. I still had a couple clutches of ball pythons here and there, and then eventually I moved to Colorado, and then I said, you know, this is my opportunity to get a fresh start on things. I'm going to keep the projects that I like, that like I really, really love, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna keep this core of, it was probably like 8 snakes or so, and I had my olive python, a water python, a couple carpet pythons, pair or a trio of Louisiana pine snakes, and a green tree python, and my 2 corn snakes. And that's what I had up until, you know, probably 4 years ago or so. So I really narrowed it down so I can build it back up in a sense.
Right. So, what all have you kept reptile-wise other than the stuff you just named, and what do you plan to, or do you want to branch out beyond corn snakes again in the future?
Yeah, that is something that I think everyone tells you to stay focused, right? But never does. And that has been very true for me. So I keep, even like my olive python, my water python, those are lone females. I'm not breeding them, but I just like having the option. If I want to add a male later, I can, but I have big females ready to go.
Cool.
And the Louisiana pines is something that no one else is working with. So the Louisiana pines are located on the border of Texas and Louisiana, and they are actually the rarest snake in North America. So they're just found in small little pockets of longleaf pine forests, and there are a few people working with them, but to be honest, colubrid guys tend to be, a little bit older and a little bit more seasoned in the hobby. So it's like you never see a young person with them. So I want to carry on the project. I want to, see it through long term, and so that's something that I love to keep. And I actually bred this year, and then I started getting into king snakes, and then eastern black king snakes are my favorite king snakes, which is kind of a underappreciated animal as far as the MBKs get all the attention. And then the eastern black king snakes, they're just like a poor man's MBK at this point. But yeah, so I branched out into those, and I mean, I kept spiny tail iguanas as well. I kept green iguanas back when you get those for $5 at White Plains, and water dragons that, fail to thrive most of the time.
I was going to say, did you ever keep one alive?
No.
So I want to know your secrets.
Yeah, no. And this was like heat rock in a 10-gallon takes type of style in 1996.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
iceberg and let it wither away.
It was not good. Yeah. We are lucky to live in the time that we are. So if you are young in this era, as long as you know what people to listen to, even if you listen to the wrong people, you'll get better ideas than what I got when I was getting started.
Well, so. And here's the thing too. Don't just listen to old man whoever down the road. Talk to a bunch of people, listen to podcasts, get on YouTube, read a book or a magazine, gather information from multiple sources, and you should not be steered wrong. If there's a consensus among 2 or 3 or 5, it's a pretty good, you can bet that even if it's not the best advice, it's probably not going to hurt your animal. Like the whole dispute between, do you keep bearded dragons on sand or, blah, blah, blah. I know a lot of people that keep sand boas and bearded dragons on sand, and they have no problems in their entire life. Other people say, oh, it's going to kill them. Oh, it's going to impact them. Oh, they're going to eat it.
Okay. And who has personal experience of that happening?
Yeah, I don't.
That person who's telling you that probably doesn't. He just saw that one picture that was taken like 15 years ago of the leopard gecko with his belly full of sand.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's gospel.
Right. Exactly. So, obviously gather information from as many sources as you can. What would you say is your bucket list animal that you would keep, at least a single or a pair, if money and time and space was no object?
So now that you said if money and space, because I have an animal that is my holy grail that I can achieve. So a black-headed python would be my holy grail animal. Okay. But if money and legality wasn't a tuatara, just because it's not a lizard, it's not a snake, it's a unique alien species, like almost alien, it is so different, and it's nothing that I could ever achieve, but it would be sweet.
You know who else wants that more than anything? Justin Kabelka told me that too.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he's a smart guy, so.
Yeah, he definitely is. So, who would you say are your mentors? Obviously, you've been around for a bit. Who have you worked with or read about? Who do you really admire in the hobby? And tell us why.
Yeah, so actually, a big guy that I look up to who really showed me kind of what it's all about is a guy named Steve Thomas, and he is in Syracuse.
Okay.
And he is actually a ball python breeder, and he Not many people know about him because he likes to stay that way, and he also breeds rodents. And Steve, at least when I was up there, which is probably 5 years ago now or so, he would, during the day, he had a job at a laboratory where he was like cleaning mice and working with mice and working with rodents. Then he'd come home and he would clean rodents and mice. And then eventually he'd be changing waters and doing that. And every time I came over, he was just in a hurry doing a million things. And I really realized, like, oh, this is actually what it takes. Like, this will not be easy. This is all you are as a farmer. This isn't a glorified, like, I don't know. And at the time, the ball python morphs were huge. That was when everything was just coming in and you had $50,000 morphs everywhere. And Steve had some of those, which is awesome to see also because he had snake currency, which is mice and rats, and when you produce mice and rats, that's one of the biggest commodities in our industry.
Definitely.
You'll see people who seasonally run out of rats, and it puts a big hindrance on your breeding season. So I just saw how Steve controlled himself as far as the discipline to keep on working that hard every single day, and just how much he loved it was also infectious in a way. And the fact that he really couldn't care about the financial stuff at all. He was just, and continues to do it just because that's what he does. and that was something that I really, really admired from him. And then podcasts is Eric Burke from Morelia Python Radio. He's a big influence as far as the podcasting goes, and just a lot of his approaches on how he keeps his animals. And yeah, he's just someone that I've looked up to in that way. And there's so many others, because honestly, like most of the people that I meet, I look up to them just because, if you're at a show, that guy probably has more experience than me. I mean, I love talking to the older guys. So Stu Tennyson is a guy who breeds hognose down in Texas. That's a guy that I love to talk to. A guy named Larry Keller, who is in the Midwest. Just these guys who have been doing it for a very long time. And Stu, if you want to talk about someone who gets hard animals to feed, he's the guy. He gets like crazy, tiny coastal milk snakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've never thought. I'm actually on a quest to go through and document. I call the series the Founding Fathers. All these guys who kind of really got us started and are still helping us along to where we are now, documenting number one, not just what they're doing right now, but what they had done. They are why we have what we have, and it's really incredible. And so Stu is somebody I should put on my list, because he's a really, amazing man. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that name.
Yeah, so if you're at the Texas shows, you'll see Stu. He's usually in the DFW. So that's where, that was like my second home as far as the snakes go. So
awesome. Let's see. I had something right on the tip. Oh, I know. So I've already kept you on here over an hour, and we're building cages outside. So my absence has been noticed. But so I wanted to ask you. A kid comes up to you and says, "Joe, man, you're so cool. You're a snake breeder. You're a YouTuber. You're a podcaster. How can I be like you?" What would you tell them?
You have to really, really want to do this. Seriously, in order to be successful at a certain level, and I'm not even there yet, like I'm not at any level to be envied, to be honest. It may look at that way from afar, but there's so many people who do so much more and so much better in ways, so just if you love it that much, then you're just going to have to sacrifice almost everything in order to make it happen. You got to be willing to, no matter what, these animals got to eat. And when your colony gets over the century mark and that feed bill is getting over $500, in the winter, you better figure it out. And sometimes that means getting really, really lean. And I need to manage my money better next time because this winter, I made personal sacrifices in order to make sure that my snakes eat. And that's just kind of the way it goes. And anyone that I know who's successful in this industry, they just did it to a point where most people would have quit. If most people encountered it, they would have quit already.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know that there are a lot of people who've come and gone out of reptiles. They wander into a reptile show, they see some high dollar animals, they think, they see the glamour, they see that it seems very exciting, that you get a lot of attention with reptiles, and they really think it's a good way to get rich quick. And the reality is that, yes, raising animals can be profitable, but few people seriously get rich if they're doing it ethically. And it's a very honest living. But to me, if you don't have a passion for it and a desire and a love for the animals, it's just.
And if you don't have that, one animal will get sick and then you quit. And that's when you sell your whole collection, because when you hit a hard point, you'll just give in.
I mean, when it's getting to be 2 a.m. and you're still out there cleaning snakes, and you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes, or you have to go make sure that you turned on that heater, or check the incubator again, or something is going wrong, or just who knows what. I mean, we are constantly building enclosures, building new incubators, breeding this, checking that. I mean, there's always stuff, and people invite us to do stuff every day, and almost every single time I tell them we're working, and people say, oh, that sucks, and really it doesn't. We're over here having the time of our life. And would I rather just go and kind of hang out and kick back once in a while? Yeah, and we do on occasion. We went on a date last night. We went out to dinner, and then we went and saw Aladdin, which was awesome. By the way, everybody go see Aladdin. But I mean, I would strongly caution anyone who doesn't have a passion for animals. And you have to really learn so much about animal science to become a breeder.
And most of the times you learn it the hard way too.
Unfortunately, that is very true. Not something I normally publicize, but sometimes the animals kind of pay during that learning process, and it is, and we all always have more to learn. So it's true. And even some vets consult with us about, things sometimes, or they ask us for our help sometimes. So it's not that we're not knowledgeable, but things happen. And, once in a while you drop the ball or forget to check on this animal, or I don't know.
Heater malfunction, heat tape melts, or craziness.
Exactly. There's no telling. I know this is just weird, but we have floods in our rat racks or in our mouse racks on occasion. And, I'm checking it every day and stuff, but sometimes I walk in there and there was a tank that I didn't see was dripping, and either there are some very unhappy, nearly drowned animals, or a tub full of drowned rodents. Now, granted, those animals were food anyway, but to know that they suffered and were afraid, and just, that's awful, I mean, I would change it if I could. Sadly, it's something that occurs when you're raising thousands of rodents. It's not fun. It's not fun to clean up. It's hard. It's really hard.
It's hard to not get down on yourself for making the mistake. Hopefully you learn it once. All you have to do is it happens once and then you learn from it. But I don't want to discourage anyone from doing this. So
yeah,
it's great, but there's downsides to everything. And trust me, it's not easy, but it's rewarding if you put in the hard work.
It is. And I would say if you have a passion for it, and by that I mean also that you're hardworking and that you're committed to learning about the animals and giving them the very best that you can, it's worth it. It's even if you never become a full-time breeder with 500 snakes or even 100 snakes, even if you're breeding, you know, you have a little trio of snakes or whatever, or you have your few reptiles that you keep, it is very rewarding. It is amazing to come home every day and see those beautiful animals that you have. So I feel like if your heart is in it, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I know, there's a few people who say, someone like Ari Flegel or Keith McPeak, right now, all they're doing is focusing 100% on breeding Boland's pythons. That is 100%. Like, and Keith is a very, very accomplished breeder, and Ari's in the zoo world, but just their focus on, they don't have a lot of animals necessarily, but they
Right.
have one of the hardest pythons to breed, and they're figuring that out. So there's something to say to that mentality too. Not everyone has to be the 500 animals. There can be the one guy who's solving a problem and, solving how can I breed these things.
Oh, absolutely. And we need, I'll say, almost everyone serves some kind of niche. Even if it's an 11-year-old with one leopard gecko, almost everyone serves a niche, and that we all together, I feel like, are an amazing force. And so when you have those super, super focused guys that are working on emerald tree boas or Boland's pythons or Offenburg eye monitors or whatever it is, do that. Do what you do best. You do corn snakes. I'll be crazy and do everything that I can get my hands on. Actually, I do turn stuff down, but I just can't. I can't narrow it down. But yeah, whatever your passion is, I would encourage you to explore that and just do your best at whatever you can do.
For sure. And I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate for you, but a lot of your things have like hundreds of babies. So that seems terrible.
Well, my biggest video is an egg sac. You've probably not seen it because I don't think you work with inverts at all, but it was a tarantula egg sac that the mother had 1,560 spiderlings that I had to individually.
So you counted them.
You have to individually house them, feed, and water them.
Okay. What do you keep them? You keeping them in like the little condiment cups, or?
Yep, that little.
You're opening and closing them and feeding them. Oh no! I thought the to-go containers with baby corn snakes was bad. That's so much worse.
No. You don't even know about tiny babies. No, but I mean, it's obviously, I was like, okay, when can I get these up to feeding stage so I can freaking sell most of them? And yeah, but those videos were, it's like 4 or 5 parts. The first part where I'm opening the egg sac and the babies are literally spilling out everywhere, and it was so crazy. And then 3 or 4 follow-up videos were just hours and hours and hours of separating them and having them run all over the place. And also too, they're so tiny. So I have a little spoon and a tiny little paintbrush to kind of corral them up onto the spoon, and then just let them slide down, because you can't even pick them up at that size. You'll just squish them. And they're just all in a big ball on top of each other and running all around. So it's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So respect to anyone who puts up with that. That's
Yeah.
Next level.
Yeah. So interesting. We all serve our little niche. So, well, do you have any parting words of wisdom for our people today on this very special Father's Day?
Not really. Just to, keep your passion alive, but also I think it's really, really important to get outside and find animals and go herping, and so you can get that connection between nature and, these things that you're keeping in a tub. It's
absolutely,
you have a totally different respect for the animal if you go see it in nature in comparison to just keeping it in a tub, and it will at the very least give you some perspective. So look into natural history and finding them in the wild.
Yes. And, almost everywhere in the world, there's native wildlife. Even if you're in the desert, there's native wildlife. If you're in a forested area, even if you're in Arctic or tundra area, obviously it's going to be quite a bit harder to find wildlife, except for maybe the occasional larger mammals, because things life is a little more secret there. A lot of stuff's underground, but yeah, pretty much everywhere you live, you can find stuff. It might not be the stuff that you're interested in keeping in captivity, but still go out, investigate, get dirty, go hiking, have some fun, look around and make some observations. I believe in that 100%. Plus, it's really fun to go out and get exercise by just going out and hiking or taking a walk. My field videos are some of my most fun videos to film, and I don't even have very many of them because we're stuck here cleaning the animals that we already have so often.
Mine usually field videos. I get really into them and I spend way too much time editing them, and they get the least amount of views. So.
There's a
But I love doing it.
Yeah, I think though there's a real disconnect between the modern snake keeper and actual herpers. But that could be a whole talk for another day, maybe.
For sure.
Well, so obviously I'm gonna link your YouTube channel, your social media pages, your podcast in the description box. Tell us a little bit about your merch line before we say goodnight.
Yeah, so nothing crazy. We just released a few shirts. We actually just did a fundraiser for the Orion Center of Indigo Conservation. So we'll put out like a couple shirts each year. Like right now I have the reptiles, the Rugrats shirt, and then we have some logo tees and different things like that for different species as well. And yeah, if you want to check it out. But most importantly, if you could follow us on Instagram or listen to the podcast or just talk to us about whatever, ask us any questions. I would love that. And then, of course, support Deadly Tarantula Girl as well.
Yeah.
Because we need to support all the people who are putting the hard work in to educate other people about whether it's spiders, tarantulas, insects. I don't care what it is. Just support, everyone who's putting in hours and hours in which most of us don't get paid for, very much. So.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I definitely want to keep picking your brain about corn snakes. I'm glad we got to meet, and yeah, you were amazing. So everybody have a wonderful Father's Day, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.